Hey everybody, it's Elaine.
And Jeremy,
You always forget to introduce yourself.
you usually introduce me.
Sometimes. Anyway, and today we're going to be talking about of age in literature. All right. So, what does coming of age mean to you? What do you think when you hear that particular phrase, Jer?
I think it's like the transition period during your teenage years, kind of going from adolescence to teenage to young adult to adult, kind of handling all the different transitions and difficulties that challenges that you face during that like tumultuous time in your life, both like physically, psychologically, socially, kind of all maelstrom all at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's a focus on the protagonist when they, mature from, youth into adulthood. I feel like you see it more in young adult novels, really, than any other type of literature. Um, and the characters are obviously younger. Most of the time, it doesn't make sense for them to really be older, I guess. Um,
And I want coming of middle age. You need new genre.
I don't feel like middle aged people want to read that. About their midlife crisis and you go buy a fancy sports car, figure out if they really wanted to marry their wives. It doesn't seem.
Untapped market.
So, what do you think coming of age stories set out to accomplish? What is the author trying to get across?
I think they're trying to tell their experience or experience familiar to them from kind of a unique perspective. At least the coming of age stories that I feel like get a lot of praise and are talked about are usually the ones that are pretty unique, that have a very specific kind of experience that the audience, some members of the audience might have experienced, and it's kind of reaching out to them, helping them through it, letting them know they're not alone, um, telling a journey that was probably personal to them and important to them.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I think a lot of it is the author trying to relate that everyone goes through this kind of stuff. You're not alone. Everybody has to grow up sometime. And I think they also set out to make the characters relatable and as relatable as possible so that
Yeah,
especially younger readers can kind of use them as a guideline to help navigate their lives. Like if something doesn't work for a specific character, maybe they're like, well, I was thinking of doing that, but maybe that's not such a good idea. Or maybe, oh, this character handled this well and that seemed to work. So maybe I should try that. Or maybe just to give them an idea at all. Some people really don't know what to do in certain situations. So it's good to have, something.
yeah. I mean, I always say a lot of authors write what they know, and audience, relate to what they know. So, I mean, this is a transition period that everybody goes through, so the audience can relate, and the author can write
Yeah,
about it and express it.
it's not a fun transition, but gotta do it. So, do you have any examples of a coming age story of age? I don't know why I just kind of cut that off.
I have. I'll bring up one that I read recently. To be honest, I don't usually read this genre, but one that I did read recently was Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
By Sherman Alexie.
Yes, by Sherman Alexie. He's telling the story of Arnold Spirit Jr. He goes by Junior throughout the book. And it's kind of telling his own experiences through this character of growing up on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Washington and kind of feeling out of place in multiple worlds. Like he kind of feels out of place in the reservation, and he feels out of place when he goes to Reardon High School, which is a predominantly white high school. He's the only Native American going there, and he's kind of going there to get himself at the behest of his teacher to get himself opportunities in life, and he kind of can see that how much further behind growing up on the reservation kind of puts him in terms of opportunities and access to like good schooling and access to jobs and things like that. And he can kind of compare and contrast. But while struggling with trying to fit in the new school, he's also struggling with guilt over like him going to a new school, taking him out of the community when the reservation community, his family's very close knit and they all know each other. They all help each other. They're kind of like one big family, and he's kind of removing himself out of that. And there's kind of guilt from him, and there's like kind of sometimes vitriol from the people from the reservation, including his best friend. The reason why I think it's a coming of age story is because it talked about him building relationships, and it's him kind of trying to overcome the things that make him different to form those relationships. Like he was born with hydrocephalus, which is he says like I was born with water on the brain. That's the first line of the book, and he so being like disabled, being a Native American in a predominantly white community, um, and not really knowing how to fit in, he has to struggle with those things every time he goes to school. It touches on a lot of social issues like drugs and alcohol, which are we don't really talk about how much that reservation life ends up kind of leading to that. Like there's really high rates of drug abuse and alcohol abuse in Native American communities, and a lot of that comes from the like the condition of living in the reservation and the lack of opportunity and the lack of being able to get out of that life. And this book touches on that from like a very personal perspective. He loses a lot of family members. I'm not going to go into it in case anybody wants to read it exactly who he loses, but he loses some people in his life, close people, friends, family, to a lot of them alcohol related, and just kind of coping with that while still trying to grow up in a world that he doesn't really fit in either side anymore. But through it all, he kind of realizes just how united his family is, contrasting it to like a lot of the kids that go to Reardon where the parents are absent or they're kind of neglected because like their jobs and careers kind of take the front seat, and they are a little bit more affluent, so they don't really have this sense of unity. But he sees that in his family, and he kind of helps him reinforce that. So yeah, I mean, I like the book.
It's a good book. It's really about growing through, growing pains, essentially. Like, I mean, I'm sure there were some things that he went through before all the action takes place in the book, but it's not mentioned. So as a reader, you can assume he was kind of, sheltered and quote innocent. He hadn't gone through all of these hardships yet, but then by the end of the book, he's, encountered all these hardships like the death of family members and, not fitting in. And I think to an extent there's some racism there. And that helps him to quote grow into adulthood because he has a better understanding of what the world is like.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing that you get from the beginning of the book and how he talks about himself and how he talks about reservation life is just the fact that the things that are negatives and the lack of opportunity and the kind of always being stuck on the reservation are just kind of assumptions he makes. Like they're givens. Like, you're never going to get out of the reservation. You know that you're going to be poor. You know that you're probably going to have family members or yourself that are involved in alcohol abuse. They're just kind of things that he accepts as part of reservation life. And part of his transformation is him kind of not accepting those things, taking the good, but trying to work on the bad and pull himself out of that and pull his family out of that.
Great. So my example is something I'm sure most of us have read in school. It's To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I know everyone's favorite. I love it. Anyway, the novel takes place during the Great Depression. It's set in Macomb, Alabama, which I think Scout describes as a sleepy little town within the first paragraph. Anyway, Scout lives there with Jem and her father, Atticus Finch. At the start of the novel, Scout, I want to call her Scout, which is just weird. Scout is almost 6 and Jem is 10 years old. At the beginning, Scout is really innocent. She plays in town or like on the street or in the yard with her brother and Dill, which is another little boy that comes to live there over the summer. They roll around in tires. They make up stories about the mysterious Boo Radley who lives next door to the Finches. She also goes to school for the first time and realizes that she doesn't like it. Surprise, surprise. But as the novel progresses, Scout is introduced to racism firsthand when her father, Atticus, who's a lawyer, decides to defend Tom Robinson in a rape case. He's accused of raping a white woman, Mayella Ewell. As a result of her father's actions, both she and her brother, Jem, face a lot of abuse from the other children they come into contact with. Jem even gets into a fight that his father has to talk to him about. Um, a mob tries to kill Tom, and I think Scout bears witness to that. She's the narrator. She tells the story much after, so I guess she would have to or have heard about it. At the very least, I'm pretty sure she was there though, and told to go home. But naturally, she didn't really obey because that's what kids do. Um, and spoilers, ultimately, Tom loses the case, even though there's all this evidence that proves his innocence. Um, eventually, also at the end, Jem and Scout are subject to an attempt on their lives, which Mr. Yule tried because he was embarrassed about what happened. He didn't like the fact that Atticus made him look like an idiot in front of the entire town. Ultimately, they're saved by Boo Radley, and that basically concludes the novel. So essentially, it's just this growth from, like an innocent person who didn't really, quote, know what the world was like to someone who was a quote adult because she did understand what the world was like. This basic idea of just maturing as you understand more things about your surroundings. Anyway, do you generally like these kinds of stories, as in coming of age novels, or the theme of coming of age, subject matter, or do you not? Why or why not?
I think the strict definition of coming of age novels, no. I like some of those aspects in other books that I've read, like certain fantasy novels where the protagonist be a little bit younger, and they kind of develop and they kind of learn about the world. But the thing with the difference with those kind of books is that the coming of age aspect of it is never the focus.
That's true.
Like
Usually
we've talked in a couple of other things about, like, Orson Scott Card protagonist tends to be really young. Ender is a little bit of an, like, doesn't really factor into this because he's like a freaking genius. But
so is Bing Wen.
Yeah, but
I don't
like Bing Wen either.
9, 6, one of those weird.
Yeah,
something like
that.
Something.
But like his Mither Mage books and his Pathfinder books, they're like the protagonists kind of grow and they learn about the world and they come from an innocent place. But like the focus is always the plot or the magic system or the things that are like kind of there rather than the coming of age aspects themselves. There's been a couple of books that I've liked, like the one that I talked about today. We discussed earlier about Symptoms of Being Human, which is technically not a coming of age book, I guess, but I liked it. It's about somebody in high school that was gender fluid. I like that one. But there's not a lot that I could name that I actually enjoy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of it's just because they seem unrealistic. Not unrealistic in the sense that this kind of thing doesn't happen, just unrealistic in the sense that I am supposed to view this person as an adult. Like, I mean, look at Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird, for example. This is considered a classic example of a coming of age story. But I believe at the end of the novel, she is 6, maybe 7. I can't view a 6 or a 7-year-old as an adult. I can't do that. You are a child. You are a very young child, period. It just, I mean, you're exposed to some adult things. Maybe you're a little more mature for your age than someone who hadn't had the experiences, but I can't view you as an adult. You are quite small.
Yeah.
You are half my size. If I am taller than you, you are not an adult.
Other people like...
If you're a kid by age. Sorry, Peter Dinklage. Sorry.
Well, so other people name things like Catcher in the Rye and The Outsiders as coming of age books. Also, It is classified as a coming of age book, which I think is interesting. That's one I can get into. But and I can actually see, like, kind of facing your fears and things like that, how that is central to the book, even though it's about a homicidal clown. But the facing your fears and kind of standing up to the world of adults that they kind of see around them is a main theme of the book. And they do get older as it goes on. Right. Like, they're adults later on. But just, I guess maybe if I had gotten into these books more when I was like actually going like through that period of my life, but I didn't become a bigger reader until like my mid to late 20s. So they didn't really speak to me as much anymore. We'll work on
that. Yeah. But that makes a lot of sense too. I think it's a little more relevant when you're younger than when you're older and you're like, I did that already.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it anymore. I am over it. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, but yeah, just not my favorite type of literature. And there's an argument about whether it's a genre or a theme. I think it's more of a theme. It's an idea being discussed.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
depends on who you ask. I don't think it's a genre. I think young adults become a genre when it like kind of took a while to get there.
That's
But
a
now
target audience as far as I'm concerned. I find it weird when people
yeah,
think it's a
it's a
genre.
genre
But
now.
anyway.
There's also that new one. What's the new adult genre that they have
Oh
now?
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, it's like everybody needs their niche.
It's all right. They're overcomplicating things.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Well, do you have anything else to say on the topic of coming of age?
No, I think I'm pretty coming of aged out.
I'm good too. So, thank you for coming again and talking about coming of age literature with me.
No problem.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Hope you have a good day. Bye, guys.
Bye.